Hi, I'm Alara. On my own birthday, my mother-in-law leaned in and said, "Be grateful to sit here." Then my husband laughed and added, "She's right, you're just a guest." They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd stay. But I walked out. And by morning, their bank account was empty. What pushed me to that point? What happens when the people who claim to love you treat you like a placeholder? Before we dive in, what time is it where you are and where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the night everything changed. It was supposed to be my birthday. I'd picked the dress days in advance, soft navy blue, long sleeves, something simple that wouldn't compete with the setting. I even added a silver pin at the collar, one my late mother used to wear when she felt out of place. A quiet reminder, don't shrink. The country club dining room was already buzzing when I arrived. I stepped in, scanning the long table under the chandelier. No one stood, no one smiled. Just a few nods, a few murmurs from faces I'd known for almost a decade, but never felt welcome around. There was only one empty seat left. It was near the double swing doors to the kitchen, directly under the cold vent, far from the head of the table. I glanced toward my husband. He didn't notice me. Or maybe he did and chose not to react. I slid into the chair. The napkin at my place was peach, while the rest were crisp white linen. A folded card sat crooked in front of me. Marlene, it read, in smudged cursive. That wasn't my name. It was a subtle thing, but it wasn't the first time. "I guess they ran out of the nice ones," I said lightly, mostly to myself. To my left, Aunt Janice leaned in toward my sister-in-law, whispering something that made them both smirk. On my right, the waiter brought glasses of water, setting them gently until he reached me. My glass clinked hard on the table. I caught it before it toppled. When my mother-in-law made her rounds complimenting everyone's attire, "Oh, Susan, that color brings out your eyes. Camille, I've always loved that cut on you." She walked right past me. Not a glance, not a word. I turned to look at Ethan, my husband. He was laughing too loud at something his brother said, slapping the man's shoulder like they were college kids again. He didn't even glance in my direction. I reached for the menu to distract myself, but before I could read it, the waiter placed a slice of chocolate cake in front of me. Dessert. Before the main course. The conversation at the table paused. My mother-in-law tilted her head with that tight little smile she wore like a badge. "Oh," she said, cool and flat. I suppose she thought that's all she'd get. She sipped her wine, then added with a shrug, "You should be grateful you even have a seat here." There was a beat of silence. Then Ethan chuckled. "She's right," he said, gesturing at me without really looking. "You're just a guest. Lighten up." A few people tried to chuckle along, but it died in their throats. The room went quiet, eyes darting between me and the cake, waiting to see if I'd make a scene. I didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I looked down at the peach napkin, the wrong color, the limp fabric now stained with a wine ring from the last person who sat there. I picked it up slowly, dabbed the corners of my mouth even though I hadn't eaten a bite, and folded it back neatly. The wine stain faced up. I caught Ethan's eye for the first time all evening. He looked away, the clatter of cutlery picked back up around the table, people pretending to return to their meals, their stories, their plans for the upcoming family vacation I hadn't been invited to. I thought about last year, how they'd forgotten my birthday until 3 days later, when a belated card arrived with the name Marla scribbled in blue ink. And the year before, when I'd cooked dinner for all of them, only to hear Camille whisper, "She tries too hard." It's sad, really. It wasn't just this year, it wasn't just this dinner, it was a pattern, one I'd excused, over and over, but something inside me felt different this time, not angry, not broken, clear. I set the napkin beside the untouched cake, stood slowly, and adjusted my dress. I felt every eye turn again, but this time I met their stares, steady and calm. "I need some air," I said. It wasn't loud, but it landed like a bell in a quiet church. No one spoke, not even Ethan. I walked past the dessert table, past the laughing couples, past the valet stand. The night air hit my cheeks as I stepped outside, cool, not harsh. A small breeze lifted the edge of my dress as I crossed the parking lot. I didn't look back. The click of the car door closing behind me was softer than the one I heard walking out of that room. But it felt the same. Final. By the time I got home, the house was dark. Ethan wouldn't return for hours, probably not until morning. I walked into the study, flicked on the lamp, and reached for the small wall safe behind the bookshelf. I spun the combination without thinking. Inside sat a folder, thick with paper I hadn't touched in over 2 years. The tab read, Contingency. I took it out, and this time I didn't hesitate. The house was quiet when I got back. Too quiet. Not the comforting kind, the kind that makes you suddenly aware of how loud your own breath can be. I didn't kick off my shoes or toss my clutch onto the entryway table. I walked straight through the living room, past the darkened kitchen, and into the home office I hadn't used in months. I didn't even turn on the overhead lights, just the soft amber glow of the desk lamp, which gave everything on the polished wood surface a warm, unreal sheen. My fingers found the safe behind the framed wedding photo. Ironic now that it had been taken the same month I funded the thing that kept his family's legacy from crumbling. I rotated the dial, pressed in the code, and opened the small steel door. There it was, a navy blue folder with a gold-embossed tab that read, Contingency. I laid it flat and opened it slowly. The pages inside were crisp, untouched since I'd placed them there. Legal agreements, wiring instructions, routing numbers, and at the bottom, an email, printed in black and white, addressed to me from their family lawyer. The signatures were all there. Mine at the bottom of the loan agreement, mine authorizing the transfer, mine listed as the grantor of the emergency funds. Theirs, her name, my husband's, even his brother's, simply filed under beneficiaries. No one else had contributed a single cent, and no one ever brought it up again. It all came rushing back, not in a wave, but in an eerie, quiet flow. 2 years ago, almost to the day. Their furniture business was bleeding. The recession had gutted their cash flow, orders delayed, suppliers pulled out. Their name, once whispered with pride in the community, was now being spoken with pity. That night, he'd come home pale as paper. "They're going to lose everything," he'd said, voice strained but not panicked, because he knew I had the means. Mom's barely holding it together. Dad's pretending it'll blow over. Would you? I had the money. I always had. My inheritance wasn't some lottery prize. It came from my grandmother's slow, smart investments in municipal bonds, trust certificates, and land nobody else wanted. She'd told me once, "Wealth is not for show, Marlene. It's for protection, for power, and if you're generous with it, make sure the deed bears your name." But I didn't want credit then. I didn't want anything but peace. I nodded. "I'll help, but anonymously. It's not about me." He kissed my forehead, said I was 1 in a million. For a few days he was sweet again, soft, grateful even, until the dust settled, and then silence. No thank you card, no acknowledgement, just air. A month later, his mother gave a toast at Thanksgiving. "We pulled through," she said, lifting a glass of overpriced wine, "because this family doesn't give up. We work, we endure. That's why we're still standing." I had smiled, bit down so hard on the inside of my cheek I tasted copper, but I'd smiled. Even now, the echoes of that night rang louder than anything I'd heard since. She'd looked me dead in the eye tonight and said, "Be grateful you even have a seat here." He'd laughed and nodded. "She's right, you're just a guest." And everyone just watched. No one spoke, no one intervened. I turned back to the folder and lifted the email. It was just a standard legal summary. Nothing flowery, nothing sentimental, but what struck me, what cut, was how clear the boundaries had been drawn. Marlene Quinn, grantor. Recipient, Laurel Quinn and Sons, LLC. The family business, the same one Laurel now bragged about, saving with grit. Just last weekend at brunch, she'd said to a family friend, "We've come so far. This business, built on sacrifice." And he, my husband, nodded with pride. Yeah, Mom really pulled us through. I'd reached for my mimosa and smiled. Now, seated alone in the soft hush of my office, I logged into the trust management portal. My grandmother's name still topped the header, Estelle J. Farrow Trust. But my credentials controlled the keys now. I scrolled through the disbursement dashboard, each quarterly payout and dividend tracked neatly. Most of the earnings from the emergency loan had been filtered directly to Laurel Quinn & Sons, LLC per the original agreement. All I had to do was click. So I did. I froze all future distributions, then redirected any passive dividends to my personal holding account, not out of vengeance, not even for justice, for clarity, for acknowledgement. I stared at the screen, watching the loading icon spin briefly before the transaction confirmed. Then quietly, I said aloud, "Happy birthday to me." I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and looked around the room. The silence now felt earned. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of decisions finally made. By the time I shut the folder and slid it back into the safe, it was nearly 2 in the morning. I locked it, turned off the desk lamp, and padded upstairs barefoot, each step lighter than the one before. The next morning, I didn't wake to breakfast in bed or flowers or even a text, just a buzzing phone. 12 missed calls from my husband, 1 from my mother-in-law. The house was quiet that morning. Too quiet, really. No footsteps above me, no drawers slamming, just the filtered hush of dawn easing through the linen blinds in my office. I sat there, still in the silk blouse I'd worn the night before, coffee cooling beside me. I hadn't touched my phone since I'd made the transfer. I didn't need to. But as the light crept across the floor and touched the corner of the desk, my phone lit up. 12 missed calls from my husband, 1 from my mother-in-law. No texts, no explanations, just desperation in digital form. I tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker. First voicemail, Jason's voice, low and shaky. "Hey, where are you? Something's wrong with the account. I tried to pay the tax bill this morning and the transaction got declined. Did you change something? Just call me back, okay? Please?" He sounded more afraid than angry. That was new. Jason never begged, not even when he should have. I didn't move. I let the silence stretch while the second voicemail rolled in. "Hi, sweetheart," my mother-in-law's voice chirped, forced sweet. "There must be a glitch in the family trust. We'll get it sorted. Just give me a ring when you can, okay? It's probably nothing. You know how banks are." I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. That fake little laugh at the end of her message, the one she used when she wanted something and pretended she didn't, was still there. But underneath it, her voice was thinner than usual. Tighter, like she was trying not to sound rattled. And that's when I smiled. She knew. Maybe not the whole picture yet, but she knew enough. 6 months ago, I'd warned them. Politely. I'd suggested maybe holding off on buying that marble and glass executive suite she just had to have downtown. The whole idea had been hers. A legacy office, she called it, something that honors the family name. Jason had chimed in like a loyal backup singer. "It's her dream, babe. Don't be heartless." The building was overpriced. The location wasn't even zoned for retail traffic, but they didn't care. Jason made it sound like it would kill his mother to hear a no. And because it was always easier to be agreeable than start a fire, I signed the authorization. Quietly. And now? Her dream bounced, literally. While they were all asleep, still smug, still snickering, I had logged in and paused every distribution tied to the family trust, every quarterly payment, every automated transfer, every clause they didn't know I had the power to pull. The call came around 7:30, just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. It wasn't from her. It was from the realtor managing the co-op property. "Hi, is this Mrs. Lennox? I just wanted to confirm. There seems to be a problem processing the mortgage payment for Unit 6D. Your name is listed on the deed. Can we talk today?" Not her name. Mine. Because when they'd insisted on putting everything under the family company, I was the one who incorporated the LLC. I was the one who filed the paperwork, and I'd been the one to keep the entire thing legally compliant. I never needed the spotlight, but I made sure I kept the receipts. I told the realtor I'd call back later. Then I stood up, walked to my bedroom, and pulled the drawer open where I kept my old files, mostly untouched since law school. I took out the small black binder marked Legal Advisory, Lennox Family Trust. I flipped past the original foundation documents, the estate disclaimers, the interspousal waivers, until I found what I needed. Section 12, Paragraph 6, Realignment of Controlling Interest. I tapped in a number I hadn't used in a long time. Bishop and Wells, good morning. This is Rowena Lennox. I need to speak with Kendra Bishop. A pause. Then a woman's voice came on, warm and alert. Mrs. Lennox, what can I do for you? I'd like to initiate a control realignment of the family trust, effective immediately. There was a pause. Understood. Do you want us to notify the beneficiaries? No, I said, eyes on the sunlight now pushing across the floor. They'll notice soon enough. I glanced down at my hand. My wedding band still sat there, shining too brightly under the light. I slid it off mid-sentence, let it spin on the marble surface. The metallic whir seemed louder than I expected. They mistook my silence for permission, I said, mostly to myself. They forgot who signed the checks. That moment sat heavy, like still air before a storm. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. But something shifted. Not in them. In me. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about being invisible until I stopped being useful. That evening, the family group chat lit up like a house fire. Ping after ping. I didn't open it at first, but the preview alone said enough. Jason, you're destroying everything. I let the phone buzz until it ran out of charge. By the time the sun dipped beneath the horizon, the group chat had become a battlefield. My phone buzzed constantly on the kitchen counter, lighting up with bursts of panic, confusion, and misplaced entitlement. My husband was first. Ethan. You're destroying everything. Mill. Where is the money? We had bills set to go out today. Sil. Monica. Wait, did something happen to Mom's co-op? She's freaking out. Ethan. Again. Call me. Seriously. This isn't funny. I didn't type a single word. I didn't owe them explanations. Instead, I walked over to my laptop, opened the folder titled Contingency, Private, selected the PDF my lawyer had updated that morning, and attached it to the group chat. Trust Control Amendments, Rev 03 PDF 1 click, sent. Then I closed the laptop, and the room was quiet again. The silence reminded me of a different day, 2 years ago, my father's last spring on this earth. He was already weaker, quieter, but somehow still the sharpest man in every room. I'd flown down to visit him after his last round of chemo. The air in his study was filled with the faint scent of old leather and lemon oil, and I remember how he tapped his pen against the document in front of him without looking up. This, he said, will give you the majority say over the trust, in silence. You won't need to use it unless they force your hand. I blinked. They don't even know I have access. And let it stay that way, he replied. Don't play hero. Just protect what's yours. And your peace. I hadn't told Ethan about the meeting, not even when he asked why I kept flying to see my father alone, without inviting him. I just said, Dad's tired. It's not personal. It was personal, of course. My father saw things others didn't. He never trusted Ethan's mother, called her ambitious in all the wrong directions. When he passed, the documents were filed. The trust's ownership, control, and future lay quietly in my name, with me as sole executor and trustee of 3 property accounts and 2 holding funds. I never used it, never even spoke of it, until today. The messages kept coming. Then a new one. Separate thread. Mill. This can't be legal. We were told I'd have access through Ethan. Your father said this was a family trust. I read it twice, leaning against the counter, sipping my tea like I wasn't unraveling the world they thought they owned. I typed back, me. You assumed. You never asked who owned what. There was a pause, maybe a minute. maybe 2. No more responses came right away, but the email came through seconds later. It was from Kendra Bishop, my estate and financial counsel. I'd CC'd the group earlier, knowing the chaos was inevitable. Kendra's tone was direct, precise. She knew how to pierce armor with words alone. Subject: confirmation of trustee authority. Body: per the attached legal filings, Ms. Narrator is the sole authorized trustee of the family trust, with full executive powers over all holdings, including Property 00394, Upper Manhattan Co-op, as well as trust accounts A, B, and C. Please direct all further inquiries through legal channels. The PDF was attached again. It felt clean, not cruel, not vengeful, just necessary. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, staring at the light bouncing off the glass of water in my hand. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt, just tired of pretending that silence was the same thing as peace. My phone buzzed again. Ethan. This time he called. I let it ring 4 times, then picked up. He didn't yell. He didn't demand. He just sounded shaken. "You never told me," he said softly. "You tricked us?" I waited a beat, then answered. "I told you not to use me. You laughed." There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment I thought he might apologize. But all I heard was shallow breathing. And then the call ended. I stood and walked toward the hallway mirror, the same one they passed every time they visited but never seemed to notice. I looked at myself, not searching for beauty or strength, just recognition. Last year, on this exact day, I'd made a full dinner for my birthday. Roasted chicken, homemade bread, lemon pie from scratch. No one brought wine. No one said thank you. They sat, they ate, they left me with dishes and silence. This year, I gave them silence instead. But mine had weight. I turned off the lamp, letting the room sink into a soft glow. Outside, the wind picked up. I could almost hear the leaves whispering against the windows. Tomorrow would bring more fallout, more texts. Probably another call from Ethan's lawyer, but that was tomorrow's noise. Tonight I rested. The next day, a knock at my door. It wasn't who I expected. It was Monica, my sister-in-law, crying. I didn't rush to the door. The knock came soft, hesitant, more like a question than a demand. I waited a moment, letting the silence settle in, then opened it slowly. There she was. My sister-in-law. Mascara streaked under her eyes, jacket barely zipped, hands trembling as she clutched something that looked like a baby blanket, but there was no baby in sight. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," she said, her voice cracking. "But please, can I talk to you? I didn't know they'd treat you like that, I swear I didn't." I studied her. This was the same woman who'd once looked right past me at family dinners, who had laughed, softly, but still laughed, when her mother made jabs about how I wasn't really one of them. But now, her eyes weren't avoiding mine. They were pleading. I stepped aside. "Come in." She followed me into the foyer, and I noticed she didn't sit, just stood there, shifting from foot to foot like she might flee at any second. "There's more you should know," she whispered. "And it's not just about the money." I glanced toward the kitchen but shook my head. Too close to the memories of last night. Instead, I grabbed my keys. "Let's go somewhere neutral. I know a place." 15 minutes later, we were seated across from each other at a quiet corner booth in a small cafe tucked between a laundromat and a dry cleaner. The kind of spot where no one cared who you were or why you were crying into your coffee. She fiddled with her spoon before she spoke. "Mom said it was for the baby," she started, not meeting my gaze. "That's how she got me to sign the papers. She said she was setting up a new account, something about reallocating funds for family protection. She said we needed to make sure the baby was covered if anything happened." "And you believed her?" I asked, not unkindly. She nodded. "I mean, it sounded right. I didn't want to fight with her, I just had the baby. Everything felt upside down. And she talks like she knows everything, like she's always 5 steps ahead." I stirred my coffee. "What changed?" She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a worn manila folder. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid it across the table. "I found these in the nursery closet. I was looking for an old photo album. I wasn't trying to spy, but this folder had my name on it, and the baby's." I opened it. Receipts, bank transfers, notations in neat, slanted handwriting, spa packages, jewelry, a high-end gym membership, a down payment for a vacation rental, none of it related to a child's medical needs. "She used the baby's trust?" I asked, even though the answer was right there in ink. She nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. "She said it was temporary, that she'd pay it all back, but the baby hasn't even been to the pediatrician in 3 months. Every time I brought it up, she said we were overreacting, that the baby was fine." I flipped to the last page. A transfer labeled, "Gift, Family Compensation," totaling 5 figures, sent to an offshore account under her maiden name. And yet, the thing that stuck in my mind wasn't the money. It was a memory. I leaned back, eyes drifting beyond the window as the cafe hummed around us. Last fall, when I visited to drop off a handmade quilt, a soft blue patchwork stitched with tiny bears and stars, I remember her reaction. My mother-in-law snatched it from my hands and barked, "You're not the mother. You don't get a say in how we raise him." I remember standing there, stunned. I hadn't asked for a say, just wanted to give a gift. My sister-in-law had been behind her, holding the baby. She didn't speak, but her eyes had flickered with something. Regret? Guilt? I wasn't sure. Until now. Back in the booth, she was dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "I didn't say anything back then," she said, barely audible. "And I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you." I folded the folder closed. "I'm not angry at you," I said slowly. "But I need to ask you something. Are you here to warn me or to stop me?" She bit her lip. "I don't know. She's still my mom." I nodded. "And that baby is still your child. Which one are you protecting right now?" Her shoulders sagged. "I just want this to stop. I want it to go back to normal." I exhaled. "There's no going back, not from this. What she's done. It's not just selfish. It's harm. To you, to the baby, to everyone she manipulates." She swallowed hard, looked down at her coffee. "So what now?" she asked. I placed a hand on the folder. "Now you prepare her, because this isn't about revenge, it's about consequences." We didn't speak much after that. I walked her to her car and watched as she drove off, wiping her face again with the sleeve of her coat. Back inside my townhouse, I paused at the foot of the stairs, eyes drifting toward the nursery quilt still folded on a shelf in the hallway. And I realized something. I'd never once heard that baby cry. Not during visits, not during family video calls, not even during the sleepless newborn months. Always quiet. Too quiet. I stood there a moment longer, feeling the weight of that silence settle in my chest like a stone. Then I went to my office, booted up my laptop, and began drafting an email. I didn't put my name on it, but I did attach the documents. And in the subject line, I wrote, "Mandatory audit request, child protection flag." The cursor blinked for a moment before I hit send. I closed the laptop and sat still, the silence of my living room wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even anxious. I just felt settled and a little sad. By the time I poured myself a cup of lukewarm tea and settled into the couch, the clock read 11:42 p.m. Outside, the wind stirred dry leaves across the sidewalk. I left the porch light on that night, though I wasn't expecting anyone. The next morning, just past 8, I got a message from Mrs. Langley, a woman who'd lived across the street from my in-laws for 22 years before moving last spring. She was never one for gossip, which is exactly why I read her text 3 times. "Morning, just wanted you to know. CPS was at your mother-in-law's house. 2 officers, said something about the baby's records. I stayed out of the way, but they didn't look happy." My fingers paused over the screen. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat back and whispered to myself, "They came." I imagined the nursery, the mint-colored curtains, the stack of unopened formula cans I had once seen behind a locked cabinet, and the crib that always looked too neat, too untouched. Mrs. Langley followed up. They asked why the baby hadn't had a pediatric visit in 6 months. Your MIL seemed caught off guard. I could almost hear the panic in my mother-in-law's voice. I pictured her clinging to composure, trying to toss blame like breadcrumbs into the wind. That house was a fortress built on fear, image, and cold control, and someone had finally knocked. An hour later, my phone rang. I didn't need to check the caller ID. Her voice was shrill, sharp. "What did you do?" she spat. "Don't you dare play dumb with me. Did you send someone to my house?" I didn't answer. "You listen to me. This is my family, my grandchild. You think you can tear us apart because your feelings got hurt? You're just bitter." Still, I said nothing, letting her fill the space with her own unraveling. She hissed, "You won't win. I will clean this up, just like I always do." Then she hung up. Moments later, a single text came from my husband, just one word. "Why?" I didn't reply. Instead, I changed out of my sweatshirt, grabbed the thick manila folder I'd kept hidden in a drawer, and headed into town. I had an appointment with a lawyer, someone who specialized in estate fraud and guardianship abuse. I didn't want to sue anyone. I just needed clarity. I needed the truth to have a witness. The law office was quiet, with the faint scent of old paper and burnt coffee. I met Mr. Denning in a corner room lined with books I doubted anyone had read in years. He wore a wedding ring that matched mine in age, and a face that looked like it had weathered family battles far messier than mine. I laid the folder between us. "These are the trust documents for the baby. Some are recent, some look edited." He flipped through the stack, pausing at a notarized amendment from last summer. "Your signature's on this one," he said, pointing. "I never signed that," I replied. He raised an eyebrow. "If this is what it looks like, if they forged your signature on documents that redirected trust funds, that's not just manipulation. That's criminal." He flipped to the last page. My sister-in-law's name appeared in one corner, legally designated as a secondary trustee for family needs. I thought about the gifts my mother-in-law had paid herself, spa packages, jewelry, a $14,000 wire labeled consulting support, and a baby who hadn't seen a doctor in half a year. "It gets messy," Mr. Denning warned gently. "Even with this, courts hesitate when families involved." I stared at the window behind him. It framed a tiny view of the courthouse steps across the square. It felt symbolic, how close justice could be, and how distant it still was. Back at home that evening, I sat at my kitchen table and watched the shadows grow long. I thought about what Mr. Denning had said, about how this could drag into years, about how it could turn me into someone I didn't want to become. Would I really tear down the house that raised my husband? Not out of spite, but to protect a child who couldn't even speak yet. I remembered my own childhood. The years I lived with silence, tucked away in corners, when no one listened, when being seen and not heard wasn't advice, it was survival. And I remembered that nursery, how clean it was, how still, no toys, no books out of place, no sounds. It wasn't about winning, it was about breaking the cycle. My phone buzzed again, a message from my sister-in-law. "I told them you warned me. I told them I had no idea. I'll protect you if this goes to court." I stared at the screen, then slowly typed back, "Protect the child. That's enough." I didn't sleep that night. I sat near the front window, the porch light on again, the same way I'd left it before. At some point, I drifted off in the chair. Morning came with the sound of the mailbox flap. Inside was a plain envelope from the state. No return name. I opened it with trembling hands. Preliminary audit outcome. Further investigation required. I exhaled. It wasn't over, but it had begun. The envelope was thinner than I expected. No embossed letterhead, just plain white, like any other piece of mail you'd toss aside. But this one didn't go in the trash. I sat with it at my kitchen counter, fingertips resting on the flap as the words echoed in my head. Preliminary audit outcome. Further investigation required. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, turned off the stove where rice was quietly simmering, and glanced toward the nursery. It was quiet now. Always quiet. A strange kind of silence, not peaceful, not tense, just waiting. By morning, another letter arrived, this time digital. A formal email from a legal assistant, addressed to me. Subject: request for private resolution meeting. It was signed by my husband, though I doubted he'd typed it himself. We believe it is in everyone's best interest to handle this matter discreetly and amicably. Please join us for a private discussion. The location: a cafe not far from the courthouse. The tone was rehearsed, polite, desperate. They didn't want a courtroom. They wanted control. I didn't reply. I just marked the time on my calendar and closed the email. The cafe they chose was one of those sterile chain places with loud espresso machines and a faint chemical smell of disinfectant, neutral territory. I arrived early, dressed simply, a navy suit, low heels, no jewelry except my wedding band. I still hadn't taken it off. I don't know why. They were already there. My mother-in-law was in her usual pastel blouse and pearls, clutching her handbag like it was a shield. My sister-in-law wore a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. And my husband, well, he stood when I approached, like we were still pretending to be civil. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat. "You asked for a meeting. I'm here." Their attorney, a man with thinning hair and thick glasses, introduced himself, though I knew who he was. I'd seen him at their holiday parties. He looked smaller in this light. My mother-in-law jumped in before anyone else. "You've humiliated this family," she said, her voice tight. "Leaking our financials, dragging social services into our home like we're criminals. Do you understand what you've done?" I looked at her. "I leaked nothing. The law acted on its own." She huffed. "You think this is about legality? It's about family, loyalty." My husband leaned in, voice soft like he used to when he was trying to coax me back from an argument. "We're still your family, despite everything." I turned to him slowly. "Were you ever?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out. My sister-in-law tried to speak, then thought better of it. She just folded her hands in her lap, eyes darting from me to the lawyer. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, thick, heavy, creased along the spine from how many times I'd opened it. "I brought something," I said. I slid it across the table, tapping the first page with one fingertip. "It's from the original trust documents, your father's version, not the amendments filed later. This clause here, Section 14B, states, should the primary beneficiary demonstrate sustained patterns of negligence or behavior detrimental to the welfare of dependents, the trustee may reallocate assets to the alternate heir named." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, scanning the line. My mother-in-law stiffened. "That clause was removed," she said quickly. "We had it taken out years ago." I nodded once. "Not in this version. I had it notarized, stored separately, legally archived." Silence thickened around the table. Her fingers twitched on her handbag. This changes nothing. You were never meant to be the heir." I didn't flinch. "Maybe not, but your husband thought differently." "Oh." My husband reached for the document, scanning it like he didn't already know what it meant. "You're destroying us," he said. "Whatever this is, it's not justice, it's revenge." My voice didn't rise. "No. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided I was just a guest in my own life. On my birthday, you laughed at me like I didn't belong, and I stayed quiet. Too long." Tears welled in my sister-in-law's eyes. She blinked quickly, brushing one away with the corner of her sleeve. Still, she said nothing. The lawyer finally cleared his throat. "We'll need time to review this," he said quietly. "But based on what I'm seeing here, it's legally binding." He closed the folder gently and pushed it back toward me, almost like an offering. I didn't take it. I stood, straightened my jacket. "I think we're done here." As I turned to leave, my mother-in-law's voice caught behind me. "You'll regret this." I paused at the door, hand on the frame. Then I looked back. Not at her, not at him. Just forward. No, I said. I've finally stopped regretting not doing this. I didn't look back, not at her trembling voice, not at the way my husband stared like I'd turned into a stranger. I walked out of that conference room with my shoulders squared and a strange calm draped over me like a second skin. It wasn't arrogance, it was closure. And as I stepped into the cool evening air, the breeze caught the edge of my coat, reminding me of another whisper, one I hadn't spoken of to anyone. "You didn't hear it from me," our old housekeeper Maria had muttered one night as she handed me a teacup in the hallway. "But they've been hiding money. Lots of it." That was nearly a year ago, before the cold stares grew sharper, before I became invisible in my own home. At the time, I didn't know what to do with her words, but I'd learned to listen closely when people spoke in half-truths. So I started small. I created a private Dropbox folder, password protected. Only my estate lawyer and I had access. And then I started digging, quietly, patiently, like someone slowly brushing away layers of dirt until something gleamed beneath. The first thing I found wasn't earth-shattering. It was a bank transaction logged under a nonprofit that didn't exist when my father-in-law was alive. But something about it felt off. So I called in someone who could read numbers the way I read faces. A forensic accountant named Brent, who worked out of a quiet office above a bookstore downtown. I met him on a rainy Thursday, files in my tote bag, a quiet fury in my chest. He listened, took notes. Then he nodded once and said, "Give me 2 weeks." 10 days later he called. "You were right," he said. "They funneled funds from the estate through a fake nonprofit. The account's based in a regional credit union upstate, harder to trace. It's under your mother-in-law's name, but your husband's been accessing it monthly." I didn't reply. I just sat on the edge of my bed staring at the framed photo of my wedding day. Me, in white, smiling so earnestly at a man who, I realized then, had never truly been mine. Brent wasn't finished. "The money originated from your father-in-law's trust. It should have gone to you and your husband jointly, but based on these signatures, someone altered the beneficiary structure after his passing." My fingers clenched around the phone. "Is it illegal?" He paused. "If it can be proven they did it knowingly and misrepresented it, it's fraud." That's when I knew. This wasn't about hurt feelings or petty in-laws. This was theft. Premeditated and methodical. Months before that birthday dinner, before the public humiliation, before I ever stepped foot into that dreadful family brunch, I took a quiet trip to my attorney's office. I filed to transfer power of attorney from my husband to myself. At the time, he didn't notice. He was busy mocking my organizational spreadsheets and rolling his eyes at my weekly planner. He never asked what was in the manila folder I'd taken to the notary. I filed an anonymous whistleblower report with the IRS using a secure channel. Brent helped me gather the documentation. We even tracked the trail of money that led to a suspicious property purchase in my sister-in-law's name, paid in full, no mortgage, just after she quit her job to focus on herself. "They didn't even change the passwords," Brent chuckled one evening, handing me a spreadsheet. "That was their arrogance. Or maybe it was their belief I was too naive, too harmless, too silent." When the report was filed, I went back to my apartment, poured a glass of water, and sat still for hours. The kind of stillness that comes only when you've stopped being afraid. Weeks passed, then months. I went on with life, visited my attorney quietly, paid Brent his fees, kept my head down. I didn't retaliate. I simply prepared. Until that morning, my birthday. She'd said, "Be grateful to sit here." He'd laughed and added, "She's right, you're just a guest." They had no idea they were dining with someone who'd already locked the doors behind them. Later that night, while they laughed in the living room and I packed my coat, I received an encrypted email. The subject line read, "Account freeze notice. Immediate action pending." Brent followed up at 8 a.m. sharp. "IRS agents flagged the accounts. They're frozen for audit." By noon, I had 3 missed calls from my husband, 1 from my mother-in-law, and a flurry of emails from their accountant, none of which I opened. Instead, I let the silence speak. Around 3 that afternoon, my lawyer called. "We may be looking at felony-level consequences. Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the first time she called me just a guest," I said. That night, I walked past our old house. The porch light was on, casting yellow shadows across the stone walkway. From the street, I could see her in the front room, phone pressed to her ear, pacing. Her voice was sharp, her hands flailing in the air. Behind her, a door slammed. My husband, red-faced, shouting at someone I couldn't see. The windows were shut, but the tension inside was so loud I almost stepped back. And still, I felt no joy, no gloating, just finality. I stood there for a while, letting it all settle. The lies, the betrayal, the reckoning. And as I turned away, a quiet smile tugged at my lips. It wasn't happiness. It was something deeper. The kind of peace that comes when you stop explaining yourself and start reclaiming your name. The wind carried a trace of salt as I stepped off the sidewalk and took one last glance at the house behind me, the house that used to be mine in name but never in spirit. I didn't slow down, just adjusted the strap of my bag and kept walking until the street curved and the ocean came into view. The sidewalk ended. My path didn't. That night I didn't celebrate. I slept with the windows open, letting the ocean hush me to sleep. This morning, I woke up to birdsong and the smell of fresh linen. My new home is smaller, quieter, and unapologetically mine. No marble, no chandeliers. But sunlight filters through linen curtains, soft and warm, as if the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I set the table for one. There's no cake, no bouquet. Just a plate, a glass, and a modest lunch I made myself. Rosemary chicken and roasted carrots. Jazz hums softly in the background, the kind that doesn't need applause. A small card sits to the left of my plate. I haven't opened it yet. I pour sparkling water into my glass and smile. "No guests, no games," I whisper. A year ago today, I sat at a birthday table surrounded by people who saw me as little more than a seat filler. My mother-in-law's voice still echoes sometimes. "Be grateful to sit here." And my husband, that smirk of his as he said, "She's right. You're just a guest." They thought they were putting me in my place. But they forgot. I'd already built my own. The morning after I walked out, the phone rang 6 times before I finally picked up. Lucille. Her voice was shaking. "We're going to lose everything. Please. Whatever you did, undo it." I didn't shout, didn't even raise my tone. "Lucille," I said, "I was never your guest. I was your shield. You just never noticed what I was holding back for your sake." She tried again. "We were family. That has to mean something." "No," I replied. "It meant something. Past tense." I hung up. And I didn't look back. My husband, ex-husband now, showed up the next week. He knocked like nothing had changed, holding a single rose like that would erase years of gaslighting and condescension. "Let's just move on," he said. "You and me. Start fresh." I walked over to the filing cabinet, pulled out the prenup he signed and forgot, and laid it on the table. He blinked like he'd seen a ghost. "You never had anything to start fresh with," I told him. "And I'm not in the business of recycling broken men." I kept the condo I bought with my own money, kept my name, and more than anything, I kept my silence. Until now. A few weeks later, I stood in the driveway of Lucille's home. She was hauling boxes into a moving van, bank foreclosure notices fluttering on the mailbox. She didn't greet me, didn't even look surprised. "Too proud to apologize?" I asked, more tired than angry. She glanced at me but said nothing. I handed her a manila folder. Inside were copies of every fraudulent transfer, every forged document, every shell account she thought no one would find. "Keep these," I said. "You'll need them when the auditors call." Then I turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw her face. Back in my kitchen, the jazz record switches tracks. I reach for the card, hesitate, then open it. "Happy birthday. I still think you overreacted, but I hope you're well. Lucille." No love, no apology, But maybe in her own twisted way, it was the closest she could get to remorse. I set the card down beside my plate. Breathe in the sea air. Exhale. There's no bitterness left, just clarity. Some people only see your worth when you're gone, others never see it at all. And that's okay. I eat slowly, taking my time. No interruptions, no snide comments, just peace, earned, not given. When I finish, I pour myself one more glass of sparkling water and raise it gently toward the open window. Here's to peace, I say quietly, the kind you build yourself. Have you ever had to walk away from family to find peace? Share your story below. I read every comment.